If everybody could take their seats, we don't want to miss lunch. So we appreciate very much your coming out this morning to honor our Alumni Award winners today. Um, Welcome back to Pomona. If this is your first visit or your 100th visit, it's always good to see people, and it's always good to be able to acknowledge our Alumni Award winners. Today we'll be acknowledging the winners of the Blaisdell um, Alumni Award and the Inspirational Young Alumni Award. And I am Frank Allbinder, if you don't know me. I'm class of 1980. It's always an honor to get to be the MC for this, and I hope it's fun too. But I live in Washington, D.C., and I am jet lagged. So we'll see how it works. I've been connected to Pomona since I entered, obviously, as a first year in 1976. And I've been a volunteer since I graduated, when I became the Boston Alumni Chapter Chair in 1980. So it's a long journey, and I'm always very happy when I come back. And I often contemplate moving here and retiring. And then I remember earthquakes and fires and gas prices and all those other things. But it'll come to pass, I'm pretty sure. Over the years, I've been very involved in admissions, in alumni chapters, the alumni board. I was a past president, so I'm on the past president's council, and the alumni award selection committee, which is made entirely of past presidents. Um, I like Pomona so much that I actually got a tattoo of Cecil Sagehen on my arm. And if you would like to see it later, I I charge 50 cents for a look and $1 for a photo with me. Um, Class gift, yeah. My reunion was last year. Um, Over the years, I've served on the alumni board, as I mentioned, and they are very engaged alumni from all generations and all geographical locations. And you've probably seen some of them around this weekend. They have these nice plastic badges that indicate that they are on the board. They served you wine yesterday. They will be involved in the class dinners tonight and at lunch this afternoon, and the wash, of course. So say hi and get to know them, because they're our conduit to the greater alumni population. They work pretty tirelessly in Seaver House and in Zoom meetings. You know, since COVID, it's all, when I was on the alumni board, we got to come here 5 times a year. And now, do they come here ever except alumni weekend? You don't care that much, yeah. Have I introduced Sarah Storm? She's our interim director of alumni relations, and I am, of course, kidding, but this is the anniversary of her 2nd month here, so. Right. She knows everything, and I would like to suggest that you direct all of your questions to her for the rest of the weekend. Um, the Blaisdell Award recipients are chosen by a committee from the past President's Council, and some of those people are here. In addition to myself, I'd like to acknowledge Rosemary Choate, class of 63, Dodie Bump, class of 76. Doesn't that mean this is like your 50th reunion? You don't look like it. The secret is none of us feels old when we are old, and so we think we look great. JP O'Connor, unable to be with us. She recently left Southern California and moved to the Midwest to be closer to family, which is always nice. And Barbary Hogue, who lives in the Pacific Northwest, was here yesterday and is involved in another event right now. So the 5 of us met with the assistance of Maria Watson, who's our Vice President for Advancement, and we had a very long list. Like, I think this is the most people we've ever had to consider for the Blaisdell Award, and so it was really tough coming up with our winners this year, but we are fascinated by them, and we know you will be as well. Um, I told you there are 2 awards this morning. The Blaisdell Award officially is one of the highest awards that the college bestows. It recognizes individuals for outstanding achievements in their professions or exceptional community service, and it's always a combination of the two. It recognizes alumni who embody the words of President Blaisdell because they've added their riches and trust for humankind. Sarah, have they redone the words on the gate because it says mankind? Have they changed it to humankind yet?
Should we have that be a class project afterwards?
Yeah, we could have a sharing session. All right, perfect. Excellent. The Inspirational Young Alumni Award honors young alumni who have graduated within the last 10 years in recognition of their dedication and achievements. Welcome. They made it. Hi. The daughter and granddaughter of one of our recipients. No, you're fine. We know what traffic is like in Los Angeles. The Inspirational Young Alumni Award is not selected by past President's Council members. It's selected by a group of peer alumni leaders, also within 10 years of their graduation. And this year's recipient is Julius Torres Kellinghusen. If I got all that right, I'm not entirely sure. You can tell us more later. I'd like to now call your attention to a video. It was sent out by the college a few days ago, but you might not have had time to watch it. But it spotlights the people who we're honoring here today. Video plays. Sarah, who does that? Who's in charge of the video? Do I click something?
Fantastic way to start out. The liberal arts was kind of like a tasting menu when you go to the restaurant and they say a little of this, a little of that. And I took classes I would probably never have thought to take, even though my career has been health and global studies. I knew those other aspects too, and so that makes me, I think, a stronger global citizen.
The liberal arts education I've received at Pomona has given me an invaluable, diverse skill set that I've been able to draw upon to tackle the many challenges that have come my way over the last 10 years. Even though my expertise in the field is public health, I find myself remembering lessons from economics or engineering or computer science class that I can use to solve these challenges, to solve these problems. And now that I'm a teacher, I find myself trying to imbue these lessons in my students as well.
Pomona shaped more who I was as a person. It fostered my curiosity and it taught me how to attack any problem with confidence. I came to Pomona quite the introvert, and volunteering to be a resident assistant in my dorm forced me to interact with everybody in the dorm, regardless of whether I wanted to or not. And that taught me that they all had interesting stories, and they were all trying to find who they were at this point in their life, just like I was.
Pomona helped me get into medical school and also prepare myself to do well in medical school. So it was really invaluable part of my education that paid off for me. And Pomona really gives us all the tools that we need to do that, to be successful, whatever choice that we make.
It's very fulfilling to feel that I've done some of the things that have sort of met up with some of the goals and aspirations of somebody coming out of Pomona. But it's not something where I want to sit back and kind of go, I did it. It really is more fuel in the tank because although I can show you what the work that I've done, I've been able to exhibit, etc., I really feel I'm only as good as the next work that I've done. I hope I haven't made my best work yet.
So I feel like I've been blessed with this amazing professional journey. Receiving the Blaisdell Award is so meaningful to me. I feel as if Pomona College has just given me one more gift. I've had what I consider just a professional life that I couldn't have imagined, and none of that would have been possible without Pomona. And now they give me one more gift in recognizing my work, so I'm very grateful.
The one person that I haven't talked about is Guy Lohman, who is here, and he is this year's winner of the Alumni Distinguished Service Award, and we will acknowledge him later on in the program in Little Bridges this afternoon. Because Peter Caldwell is unable to be with us, he lives in Hawaii and tries never to leave, evidently. That's not true, but I just wanted to say a little bit about Peter in his absence. Um, he, there's been a lot of flooding in Hawaii. You know, this climate change that they say doesn't exist, we know probably does, and it's affected his home, so he was unable to travel. But he wants to come next year, and he wishes everybody well and is sorry to miss this. I just wanted to share a few words about this very extraordinary sage hen. Peter is class of 1961. He's a pediatrician and a pediatric cardiologist whose career reflects deep commitment to medicine and service. After Pomona, he got his medical degree at UCLA, but served as a battalion surgeon with the U.S. Marines in Vietnam and Hawaii for 3 years. He spent more than 30 years in the medical field, but he's also an accomplished author and photographer. He's documented wars, culture, and sort of the human experience in general, which I think you could say about almost any photographer, Stephen. He continues to serve his community, doing medical mission work and surgeries for children in Vietnam. And we're deeply proud to have him part of the Sage Hen family and the positive impact that he continues to make as a member of our alumni. So we're sorry he couldn't be here, but let's clap anyway for Peter, because I'll tell him there was an uproarious outburst of cheering, and yeah, nobody will know. Next, I'd like to introduce our Young Alumni Award winner, Julius Torres Kellinghusen. That is, yeah, do you run into trouble with that? Sometimes. Vielleicht. Julius teaches at the College for Community Health at Montclair State University in New Jersey, where he prepares future practitioners to meet complex public health challenges with ethical rigor and cultural humility. He's collaborated with international agencies, including UNAIDS, UNICEF, and PAHO, supporting programs in Vietnam, Kenya, Uganda, Ukraine, and New York, and you saw some pictures of him in the field in the introductory video. He worked as a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama, and he focused on water, sanitation, and hygiene initiatives in rural and indigenous communities, and later he served as president of the Volunteer Advisory Council. He's an international relations major. He also holds a Doctor of Public Health degree and a Master of Public Health degree in Global Health from NYU. He researches and teaches in ways that reflect his commitment to supporting communities and advancing the well-being of those working on the front lines of global health and humanitarian response. And if ever there was a time when those skills were essential and highly valuable, it is probably right now. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Julius Torres Kellinghusen.
Check, check. All right, I'm a professor, so I have to move around, otherwise I get distracted. So thank you so much to the Alumni Association Board for selecting me for this award. I can't imagine being up here and sort of representing my class of 2016 when there are so many other people, so many of my peers who are doing amazing things, people who are doctors, people who fight for the rights of undocumented people, people who fight for the rights of natives and for tribal rights. And I'm so blessed and honored to be here now and hope to communicate and take you on a little journey of how I got to be where I am and how Pomona helped me get to this place. So please come along as I take you on this little trip that started with a letter I received in 2012 before I even came to Pomona and ended with me getting married in India last year. So this is me, Admitted Students Weekend 2012, where Pomona invited a bunch of us to come and see the campus. We hadn't put a deposit down, we hadn't committed to coming here, but Pomona's like, why don't you just come check it out? And I was like, great, free trip to California. I know I'm gonna go to Brown, but you know, might as well. And literally the moment I stepped foot on campus, I just fell in love. And I knew that this was going to be the place where I would spend the next 4 years. Here's me. And so apparently did all of these other people. This is not a staged photo. This is just random people from this first weekend. 11 out of 12 of us, including Jerry, decided to come and complete our undergraduate degree at Pomona. And all of this was only possible because Pomona is so generous. And the financial support that Pomona provides, especially to lower income and first generation students, makes it possible for us to have the same opportunities that people from a wealthier background might take for granted. And like so many of my peers, I started out at Pomona in the pre-med track, wanting to be a doctor. And I tried to find a picture of a doctor in like a white coat and everything, but the only picture I could find is this guy. And this dream that I've had since I was maybe 4 years old didn't last very long. I really have no idea why. Who knows where that dream went? So I pivoted and switched my major to international relations with the dream of now becoming a UN ambassador, a field worker for the United Nations, kind of like this guy. So I guess you could say I went from the Pitt to Brad Pitt. And that really shaped the rest of my life. And this was only possible thanks to, of course, the liberal arts education at Pomona, allowing us to explore, allowing us to make mistakes, to change our minds, and not be locked into one path the entire time that we're here. Now, there are two more really important factors that enabled me to have the life and career that I did. One is the alumni of Pomona, which is many of you, and the professors at Pomona. One of the most impactful alumni for me was Bertil Lindblad, who unfortunately passed away in 2023. And he came to Pomona after his long and illustrious career at the United Nations to be the head of international initiatives. And he introduced me to the head of UNAIDS in Vietnam, where I spent one summer in 2014 working on HIV projects, including something called Treatment 2.0, and also working with the UNAIDS Green Initiative to support the environmental activism in the country. And this was really my first dive into global health, into the thing that ended up being my career. And the year after that, Professor Heidi Haddad, who was also my advisor, was teaching a class on NGOs that I was in. And she invited this guy, Peter Navarro, who some of you might know, to talk about his organization, HealthRight International, at the end of which he invited us, the students in the class, to come do an internship with HealthRight in New York that summer. And so I went and did that, along with fellow 2016 graduate David Baxter. And we worked on this little report on equitable health access for LGBTQ refugees living in the US, which was and still is a huge problem. And that really cemented my desire to focus on this as a career, on helping the marginalized, on building a more equitable society. So then I graduated, and I was like, now what? Oh, and of course, all of this was only possible thanks to the Pomona College internship program that provided the funding that allowed me to travel to Vietnam and to afford rent in New York. So thank you to the PISA program. And I was like, now what? And I wasn't quite ready for grad school yet, so I put on my little backpack and I headed out to Panama to work with the Peace Corps for 2 years. This is my little hut that I lived in, and my cats that helped me dig the trenches. And Peace Corps was a life-changing experience, of course, and it was really rooted in community-based development and working with communities, not on communities, but with communities. So I lived in the same village of about 50 people for 2 years and tried first to understand what their problems are, what they wanted to focus on, what they wanted to fix. And it was a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, a lot of working with the water committee. And then we got to work. So part of my program, my program was WASH, water, sanitation, and hygiene. Part of that is sanitation. So this is me at the bottom of a pit latrine, unused, luckily. But we built a lot of these just to, contain the things that go in there. The other part was hygiene. So we built For example, these tippy tappies that allowed the children to wash their hands without dunking them into a bowl of water, which then, of course, would transfer the contaminants. But the bulk of the project was, of course, the water. So the community where I lived didn't have running water. People had to take their buckets and their donkeys to a little well down the road and then schlep them back. And if you know anything about global health, you know that it was usually the women and the girls who were doing that work. So we really wanted to bring the water to the people. And the way we did that is we started out finding a spring up in the mountains, then building a little retaining wall to collect that water like a funnel, and eventually bringing that water, schlepping more pipes up the river, up the hills, and bringing the water to the communities. And this took basically all of the 2 years. The actual work was like a few months, but like getting to this point took so long. And during this process, I again got to use that liberal arts education because, it's a lot of communication, working with people, but also engineering. So my engineering classes came in helpful when we had to build these air release valves, for example, or this lockbox that I kind of built, MacGyver together, to help water committees regulate the water use. And then at the end of the process, of course, you need a water tank. And here we are with our representative, Maribel Ibarra, who was the local government representative, and she funded this whole project. So there's no external funding. It was entirely funded by the community, and building that relationship with the politicians was a key part of the project to ensure that even after I'd left, they would not be left alone. They would have somebody on their side to support them. So we got the tank in place, and for the first time in many years, this community had running water. And it was just such an amazing experience working with these people for 2 years, making friendships, building community, and having such a tangible result at the end. Thank you. Then I finished Peace Corps. This was our gong ceremony, rang out, and I went on to NYU for my master's degree. I didn't realize that Jason Harris from the class of 2015 was also a poster child at NYU, but that was a fun fact. And I also reached out to Peter again to see if he had a job for me. And he's like, no, sorry. But a few months later, things changed, and I was able to work at HealthRight. And what started out as a part-time job ended up being a 7-year-long process where I worked on basically every aspect of HealthRight's organization. Here we are. And this was, again, so transformative because HealthRight's model, the sustainable development, is relatively unique in global health. We had about 10 headquarters staff in New York and hundreds of staff in the field. And we had a 0 expat policy, which meant that we never sent anyone to go do the work of someone who already lives in and knows the community. So moving on to NYU and HealthRight. And at HealthRight, we worked in Kenya on maternal health. We had a maternal mental health program in Uganda that was really impactful. And we worked in Ukraine. And especially after the invasion in 2022, we developed this program called Caring for the Carers, which was dedicated to taking care of the people at HealthRight who were providing services. Because in the humanitarian world, you're always taking care of others, but who takes care of the humanitarian workers? And that's what this program was dedicated to. And I started my doctoral degree during these 7 years, and that ended up being the focus of my dissertation as well. So here's me presenting my dissertation, and then I graduated. And started immediately working at my next job, my current job, as a professor of public health at Montclair State University in New Jersey, which I didn't think I would ever want to do. I never had aspirations to be a teacher, but now it's so fulfilling. It's so amazing to work with the younger generation and share what I was able to learn here at Pomona with them. Now, I might be missing something. On my first day at grad school of the master's program, I met Sakshi, and a week later we went on our first date, and then we moved in together and we got 2 cats. And then a few years later, we got engaged, and then finally last year, So that's how that one little letter that I received in the winter of 2012 allowed me to have this relatively short career, actually, but also to meet and marry my best friend. So thanks, Pomona.
We're gonna take a picture. Have to make sure it's the right. So, where do you want us?
Out of that weird one.
I emit weird ones. Sarah doesn't mind.
Okay, this is great. Perfect. You're good.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations to Julius, and it's hard to top an Indian wedding, so I know, should have changed the order. Just as an aside, our alumni chapter chair in Washington, D.C., where I live, her son got into Pomona and a lot of other schools, and yesterday he accepted admission at Brown. He didn't want to be that far away from home if he went here. So there you go. Different paths, different letters lead us in many different directions. It's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Pamela Schaff. She is in the class of 1976 also, but again, does not look like that is possible. So you started college at 12. We have a couple of people like that at the University of Virginia, where I work sometimes. Pamela is a professor of medical education, family medicine, and pediatrics at the Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California. Sarah, didn't you work at the University of Southern California? Never. We have a lot of people here on staff who worked at USC, and so I kid them all the time. Yeah, she totally did. She's lying. Pamela was among the pioneers, I found this fascinating, of narrative medicine, launching the country's second master's degree program and helping advance the integration of the arts and humanities into physician training. You were an English major at Pomona on the pre-med track, and you graduated first in your class at Mount Sinai School of Medicine? Wow, that Pomona education helped. Yeah. Let's talk about where I graduated, or let's not talk about where I graduated. Pamela's work reflects the power of interdisciplinary learning, and I think that's a through line in today's Blaisdell recipients. You'll hear this a lot in their presentations. It continues to shape the next generation of physicians, and for that we are extremely grateful. Please give a warm welcome to Pamela.
Set up some tech here, sorry. I'll use this. Okay, hold on 1 second. I have to allow, and before you click that, let me it said it was supposed to mirror right away.
Yeah. See, it's going out. There we go.
Thank you so much. What?
You're not allowed to touch it.
Yeah, clearly. Hold on.
Maybe it's just.
There's something going on with that.
Does anyone want a Pomona story from Frank while we wait?
We want to see the tattoo.
He's wearing a long sleeve shirt, so we have some challenges.
It's not as majestic from a distance, but as I said, I'm selling photo ops afterwards. Don't you walk up and down the aisle? You know, the minute I get my shirt off, it's going to work.
Okay, so I have a Pomona story. I have a Pomona story about Frank. When I first started at Pomona in 2018, I said, there's the tattoo. No, when I first started at Pomona in 2018, I asked all my colleagues, I said, who is the guy that keeps taking off his shirt? And everybody said, oh, that's Frank.
You don't want to see me in a tank top. I tried that one year. I don't have the body for it.
Not working yet. Any more tattoos?
Wow, I have this tattoo.
All right.
But it's not nearly as exciting and it's not Pomona related. Stephen, will yours work better than this?
Hopefully.
It'll be an afternoon of surprise.
Hopefully it won't be a surprise.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the connection.
That's right, I'll pull the thing out.
Are you going to have the same?
What?
Are you going to have the same?
I don't think so. I'm actually going
There.
Gary, you have to stand.
No, yeah, we never know. So Gary, you can't go too far.
All right, here we go. First, I just want to say thank you. I feel so humbled and really grateful to receive this award. Because the telling and receiving of stories has been At the very heart of my professional journey, I'm going to tell you a story that starts at Pomona College, where I arrived in 1972 as a pre-med English major, and I lived a double life. My humanities friends wondered why I could sometimes be found north of 6th Street, which I think is still the geographic demarcation between the math and science buildings and the humanities buildings. I don't think my pre-med friends noticed if I was not in their neighborhood because they were studying. But although my course of study may have confounded others, it made perfect sense to me because I had loved reading and writing and the study of literature since 7th grade when Mrs. Melvin taught me the magic of close reading, and I wanted to be a doctor. There were very few other pre-med English majors, and I quickly learned that this was considered a risky move and not at all advisable. As in, the pre-med advisor told me I would likely do very poorly on the MCAT exam and would therefore very likely not get into med school. I didn't like his advice. So I went to my college-appointed advisor, Richard Fass, who told me that if I wanted to be a pre-med English major, I should do that. I should study what I was passionate about, and if that included literature, so be it. Richard was the first gift I got from Pomona. I admit I was a bit overwhelmed at first. Chemistry, calculus, English, and philosophy that first semester. I don't remember if it was Barb Schwartz who found me or I found her, but my earliest memory of our friendship is the two of us on the floor of her dorm room, one of us crying at any moment, at any given moment, and we were surrounded by chemistry books, and notes, and slide rules. Don't ask anybody who younger than us what a slide rule is, they don't know. But our 54-year friendship was the second gift I got from Pomona. I need to talk about organic chemistry, though. And by the way, you're not the only one who got a C. But there was no antidote for that misery. Barb and I had too many to count crying sessions as we weathered scary labs and brutal weekly quizzes. And after that year, my sophomore year, I decided I needed a break after having been in school since the age of 3 and began to plan a semester abroad. I knew the pre-med advisor would have told me that this was another really bad idea for my med school chances, so I didn't tell him. Instead, I talked to Richard, looked at options for college credit while away, and went to Israel with a friend from Scripps to volunteer in a hospital and on a kibbutz. When I returned energized and refreshed, I continued my studies, took the MCAT, and applied to med school. The pre-med advisor was right about the MCAT thing. I hadn't taken as much science as most pre-meds, so my science score was not good. It was actually really bad. Fortunately for me, Mount Sinai didn't consider MCAT scores as heavily as overall undergraduate performance, and they liked humanities majors. So I did get into medical school. I did just fine. I should also mention here that when I headed off to New York, I reached out to Tom Marr, who had graduated from Pomona a year before me and was now in med school at Mount Sinai. He was the only person I knew in New York, and he was so kind and supportive as I adjusted to med school and life in the city. He became a good friend and incidentally introduced me to my husband. So another gift from Pomona. So during my 3rd year, I fell in love with each discipline during my clinical rotations, and ultimately I chose pediatrics, not because I like kids more than grown-ups, but because I liked being around pediatricians. They were smart, warm, generous, playful, and compassionate. I came back to California to train at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. After training, and about a year into my pediatric practice in the community, I was invited by USC to teach a group of 6 first-year medical students in their early clinical skills course, the Introduction to Clinical Medicine, or ICM program. I realized I loved teaching as much as I enjoyed practice, and USC's program was way ahead of its time in medical education. Students spent half a day per week at the bedside of patients from the very first weeks in medical school. They learned interviewing skills and physical exam skills, but also how to listen to patients' stories. When the position of ICM director became available, I like to say I was made an offer I couldn't refuse, and I came to USC full-time. I continued to see patients, now at USC, and I also began learning everything I could about clinical skills education. And at one professional development conference that I attended, Rita Sharon was the keynote speaker, and she was introduced as an internal medicine physician who was about to defend her dissertation in English. About 2 sentences into her talk about the emerging field she named narrative medicine, I recognized that I found a way to understand my own professional journey. My passion for literature has always been about the power of stories to expand my understanding of the world beyond my own life's experiences. At the same time, bearing witness to the stories of my patients and their families, as well as those of the patients who share their lives with the medical students that I supervise, have sustained my passion for medicine. I learned that Rita and her colleagues at Columbia had discovered, and I quote, that they didn't have to invent the means to adopt patients' perspectives and to imagine their patients' plights. They simply had to teach the skills and sensibilities currently being taught over in English and composition. One more note about my years in middle school and high school. My father was a former English professor. He had read my papers and proclaimed that I was bound for grad school in literature and a scholarly life in the academy. Now, some 30 years later, inspired by Rita's journey, I actually began to contemplate graduate school, and in 2001, I enrolled in USC's inaugural PhD program in literature and creative writing. I loved graduate school. My work schedule allowed me to take 1 course per semester, and after long clinic or teaching days, it was great to sit in a classroom, reading, writing, studying narrative theory, modernism, 19th century novels. I was so happy. This was close reading on steroids, and I soon noticed that, that my studies began to seep into my clinical work. I found myself doing a different kind of close reading or close listening in my pediatric practice. Close reading trains the perspective taking that's essential to clinical work. Physicians and nurses and social workers have to dwell in their patients and that patient's family members' point of view separately, in sequence, and sometimes must hold all simultaneously. We also have interprofessional, we have to acknowledge and incorporate the interprofessional, oh gosh, thank you. Thank you. Can I make that go away? Start from the current slide. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we have to acknowledge and incorporate the perspectives of our consultant or interprofessional colleagues as well. So I got better at this. I got better at attending to voice and tone and imagery and metaphor, silence, and I could more quickly imagine the multiple points of view represented in the room. The apprehensive toddler, her father, her mother who's on the phone, and whose cell phone, speaking by cell phone on the kids' table, and the medical scribe who's in the room taking notes. In the time-pressured world of primary care practice, I began to experience the slowing down born of close attention and the resulting space now available for more meaningful connection and for taking action on behalf of those I cared for. I'd also incorporated the tools of close reading in my teaching with early clinical students. I asked my ICM students to read fiction and poetry and to write reflectively about their literary and clinical encounters. And over the years at USC, in my roles as director of our Humanities, Ethics, Art, and Law, or HEAL program, and as dean for curriculum, I'd begun to incorporate the arts and humanities as well as narrative medicine's principles and methods in other courses and clerkships across our 4-year curriculum. I convinced our dean to fund an artist in residence, and our art and medicine program was born about a decade ago. And some of the images you've seen have been in our art gallery. Our art gallery exhibits artist patients' work about their illness experience that aligns with what the students are studying in their core curriculum. And our students visit local museums to look at art in the service of honing their close observational skills and their tolerance for ambiguity. I partnered with a colleague from the English department at USC, one of my classmates in grad school, and we designed and taught a year 4 elective in narrative medicine. And in 2018, I hired her to become the associate director of the program. And our vision was to grow the presence of the health humanities at USC. But as we began to imagine what that might look like, we recognized that our backgrounds, we were narrative girls after all, positioned us to perfectly to create the nation's second master's program in narrative medicine. So what exactly is narrative medicine? This is really hard to do in a fast time, so ask me questions after. But Rita Sharon defined it first as clinical practice fortified by narrative competence, the capacity to recognize, absorb, metabolize, interpret, and be moved by the stories of illness. Simply, it's medicine practiced by someone who knows what to do with stories. In USC's first year, 1-year, 32-unit master's program in narrative medicine, our students studied literature and narrative theory, creative writing, ethnography, phenomenology, health justice, qualitative research methods, and more. Narrative medicine's interdisciplinary fields of inquiry that illuminate how individuals come to recognize each other across existential difference, and its pedagogy that flattens hierarchies and makes space for voices that aren't always heard, position our learners not only to provide narratively competent care to patients, but also to advocate effectively for health justice, to become professors in, professors in the humanities or social sciences, and to educate the future custodians of our world's health and health systems. They learn to lead narrative medicine workshops for staff and clients at our community partner social services organizations, cancer support groups, our house grief support, and more. They go on to medical school, physical therapy, or other health professional schools, work in the nonprofit sector or in health advocacy. Some have gone on to graduate school in anthropology or psychology, some to law school. Some are practicing doctors or pharmacists or speech therapists who want to enhance their own practice and teaching. We've come to realize that all of us, as clinicians and as human beings, can benefit from being narrative medicine practitioners. And I'm proud that in 2 weeks, we'll graduate our 6th cohort of master's students. So I'll close by saying I'm still joyfully employed because my professional journey, a journey that included deep learning and training in medicine and literature, has brought me to this time and place where I can do meaningful work that I hope will contribute to the formation of compassionate clinicians and humans who are good listeners, who can more effectively imagine the situations of others, and who know what to do with stories. That all started here. Every time I crossed 6th Street, I read those words about bearing our added riches and trust for humankind. I like that. And I think I received them as sort of a challenge or a noble aspiration or expectation. In the Jewish tradition, the rabbis talk about the concept of tikkun olam, or our partnership with God to repair the world, our obligation to leave our own small corner of the world better than we found it. Pomona College inspired me to find my corner of the world by cultivating my curiosity, encouraging my deep and wide learning, and reminding me to follow my passions. Receiving this award is one more really special gift, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
We're going to take a picture. If I unplug this, will the building explode? Oh, Gary. That was amazing. And Pamela, at lunch, I would like to tell you the narrative tale of my torn complex tear in my left medial meniscus. So, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Our next recipient, we are so glad to have here because she literally arrived on campus a little over an hour ago due to some flight complications. But she and I are fellow Southwest aficionados, and so we're used to that sort of thing. That's actually how I tore my medial meniscus. I was running through the airport so I wouldn't lose my boarding position because I had A2. There are important things in life, and then there's getting a good seat on an airplane. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Woutrina Smith. She is from the class of 1996, so you already look great. I don't have to lie about how wonderful you look because no, I'm kidding. Oh man. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, look at that. I've never used a clicker or done, I was a music major and I am a musician, and so I've never used that ever. I've never needed to. So Woutrina's career actually meshes nicely with some of the other things that we're hearing today. She's a global leader in infectious disease epidemiology, and honestly, again, what better time to have experts in that field? She is an associate dean at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, and that is where they built the first In-N-Out burger in Northern California, right on the highway near the exit. Don't ask me how I know. She's also the executive director of the UC Davis One Health Institute. Her work connects human, animal, and environmental health to address complex global challenges. She's led major international initiatives across Africa, Asia, and the less exciting California. Her career reflects a sustained commitment to global health, education, and interdisciplinary collaboration. Are you catching the theme here? It was not entirely planned, but it was one of those serendipitous events. So please join me in welcoming Woutrina, who will, do you have a computer? Or are you going to hook it up? Because I don't have any more good tattoos. All right. Great. There's a clicker somewhere. Oh.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here together. It's really special to be back on campus. I love some of the ideas we've already heard about, and the narrative medicine and the art in medicine are really getting me thinking, what could we do in the veterinary world at UC Davis that maybe might, help to translate some of those ideas into the animal and environment space. So I grew up in Alaska. My parents both went to Pomona, met here, and were a doctor and nurse, and eventually decided California was a little too crowded and they were going to head north. And when you go to Alaska, you either love it or hate it. They loved it, so they stayed. And so I grew up there. And of course, when you grow up somewhere, you think, I need to go somewhere else, like as far away as possible. So I came to Pomona because it was far away, the opposite of what Alaska had been like. And I had family here, and my grandma's here and stuff too. But then once you leave somewhere, you realize how much you loved it, right? And that was true for Alaska. That was true for Pomona as well. And so I went into veterinary medicine really because I loved wildlife, but I didn't think I could get a job doing wildlife stuff. When I was here, I would say pre-health, because pre-med and pre-vet are really the same classes, right? Veterinary school is 4 years of clinical training, but you're doing comparative approaches. So many different species, what you learn for a primate or a person, for a cow, for a chicken, for a cat. There's a lot of similarities there. And so I loved being in school, kind of a lifelong learner. And I realized when I went to Pomona, did study abroad in Australia for School for Field Studies, and that again kind of said the wildlife thing is really calling me, but how do I make that a job? And decided to keep going. And so veterinary school is where I landed, and that's something that gave me a space. Now, for those of you who know veterinary medicine, it's about 70% women, and it's about 70% small animal clinicians, right? That is where most of the jobs are. And so I thought, once I eventually got in, that I should go do small animal medicine. And then I realized once I got to Davis that what you do outside of going to class matters. And so in order to stay motivated, right, because we weren't yet immersing the students in clinical hospital rotations right away. We do that now. We've changed our whole curriculum, actually. But there I would just start volunteering. And why are sea otters dying? One of the wildlife things that was happening at UC Davis, the mystery of why are so many southern sea otters dying? And all of a sudden that kind of turned me into the CSI thing, figuring out what's going on with these mystery illnesses. And so what I would do for fun, in the evenings after studying with the sea otters would then come full circle, and I could figure out, well, the diseases that are killing sea otters are brain infections from parasites that come from land animals. And if you guys know sea otters, they live right along the coast, right? They're not land animals, but they eat about 25% of their body weight every day. So I think if you ate 25% of your body weight in like shrimp and clams and crabs, that's a lot. And they live in the near coast environment. So all the pollution that happens on the coastal areas, and when it rains, that comes into the rivers and streams, that flows into the nearshore ocean and estuaries, and that's where the sea otters live. So the sea otters were acting as sentinels. They were teaching us by what they were getting ill from, that was giving us clues to what might be making people sick as well. And so what we learned for terrestrial and wild felids, which are the hosts for toxoplasma, right? Some of us in this room are infected with toxoplasma, but we're not sick because our immune systems are doing our job, was causing fatal infections in sea otters. And so we could start to figure out what's going on with this land-sea pollution thing before it was really apparent in people, but it was raising awareness, and that was important. And that was showing me the real connections between the health of animals, people, and our shared environments. So that was a good motivator. Also, growing up in Alaska, I was there for the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And so that was a very vivid, real thing, that people were messing up the environment, and we really should do something about that. And so moving into a veterinary training position was a chance to say, maybe I can figure out how to do something about it. And so what I love about my job now, which is really overseeing programs that work with all of these species, the Oiled Wildlife Care Network, which you'll see on the next slide, is a response program really funded specifically to be prepared or respond in California and elsewhere when there are oil spills on land or in the ocean. We have a carnivore project that is working with understanding what happens with mountain lions and wolves and different species that are at this urban wildlife interface. How can we do that better? The penguins in Latin America are really cool. We just have some new work coming out now showing how if we put some little bands that don't hurt them, but little bands around their legs and let them go be penguins, when they come back and we take the bands off, it tells us all about the pollution that was in the waters that they were swimming in. It doesn't hurt them, teaches us a lot. And we are finding some of the really persistent pollutants in the most remote areas of the world where these guys live, which just helps to remind us that we have a global impact. And then on the right, you see the mountain gorillas. And those guys are really special. There's not very many of them. We run the program Gorilla Doctors that's in Uganda, Rwanda, and DRC, so Eastern Africa. When I started at UC Davis, most of the veterinarians that were going to do the work there were from the US, sometimes from Europe. And now we've actually worked ourselves out of a job. So we've trained and worked really closely with local veterinarians in those 3 countries, and those programs are led by those individuals, and we're a little more on the sidelines, which is really cool, actually. So we had recently a couple of real successes with the gorillas, which hopefully are a little inspiration in a year that's been really crazy for federal research funding, et cetera. And so the gorillas are really ones that we watch closely. They're habituated, so you can be able to do research without bothering them. You still respect them and all. But when COVID happened, right, the pandemic happened, everyone started wearing masks. And masks had always been controversial for ecotourism. Ecotourism is how we fund the work that conserves gorillas and their habitat. So when we pay to go visit the gorillas for a very special hour up in their habitat, all of those funds go back to then support the conservation, the community health care actually for the people that work in those parks, as well as the research that's helping to guide conservation policy. And when everyone started wearing masks during the pandemic, we found that the respiratory infections, the things that were making the gorillas sick, started to go down. Because we know what makes a gorilla sick can make a person sick, and vice versa. So masks were protecting the animals, they were protecting us, and it was one of the first evidence that really ecotourism is important, but we should be doing it in a way that's very thoughtful to try and protect the health of the animals and the people. And then more recently, we had a success in that we have these 3 countries that work together, and the veterinary teams are fantastic, but they're from different countries. We were able to do the first translocation. And so Gorilla Doctors was able to work with a few of the gorillas that had been in captivity, translocate 4 of the females to another part of East Africa, another country. And they've now been taken into those new troops, and it essentially triples the population in that area. So the diversity of genetics to be able to help those animals move forward is really something that we're trying to take a regional approach, right? No one of us has all the solutions, but by having these teams approach, that's been very important. So just a few of the programs that we're working with around the world, and I'm very honored to be able to work closely with them. I mentioned the Exxon Valdez oil spill. That was a real motivator to be able to think through, how do I take the interdisciplinary themes and team-based problem solving that Pomona had started for me, how do we apply that to other complex problems? And so thinking through now, for all the barrels of oil, there's a very small tax that goes into preparedness, and that funds the Oil Wildlife Care Network. And so our organization out of UC Davis then trains around the world, but especially responds and works closely with coastal rehab centers along the California coast and then up through Alaska, so that if there are oil spill events, that we can have an early response, we can work across the different agencies involved, and really do our best for animal and environmental health, as well as protecting human health. So that was important, and that was a big motivator. This is a little bit about just the path as part of being a veterinarian. Right? You do a whole bunch of different things. And I hadn't really thought about doing it globally, but then, one thing leads to another. And so starting with sea otters in Alaska really led to doing work in Southeast Asia. Those elephants are in Sri Lanka, where we started running a field course, which we still do. The RX1 Health Field Institute takes 30 early career professionals from around the world, and we spend 2 to 4 weeks in a place, and they move around and experience the One Health, collaborative, transdisciplinary problem solving for whatever those community issues are. And so in Sri Lanka, elephant conflict, the health of elephants, zoonotic diseases, those were some of the things that started getting people interested. This coming year, we're going to do it in Ireland in June. So we're going to do a new location. We've done this in East Africa and California also. But I'm excited to be able to take a focus on sustainable food systems in the one coming up. How do we have social scientists, health professionals, local stakeholders really thinking about problem solving and what might work to improve the health of animal, people, and the environment in a more integrated way? That's really what that's doing. A lot of my work's been in East Africa and Tanzania, working on various zoonotic diseases. Later this year, we'll have the first ever veterinary-led clinical trial for a vaccine that actually my husband, who's there with the beard, developed as a Rift Valley fever vaccine to protect livestock in East Africa from this Rift Valley fever virus. So CEPI, one of the European funders, is supporting us to take this One Health approach and really see, could it protect people? Could this help to say, when the rains are coming, and now we have a super El Nino event coming this year, so we may get more tests than we want, but could we vaccinate livestock and or people in order to protect the health of all of them? And the modeling that we're doing says yes, but we may get a chance to actually try that, which is really cool. So a lot of different things that have come out of really thinking globally, acting locally, and I would say Pomona is a big part of really what started that whole trip. So if any of these ideas are interesting or kind of piquing your interest, reach out to me. I'd love to talk more about it. There's always a lot going on, but it is a very special place, and I'm really honored to receive this award. Thanks very much.
That was so interesting. I have to ask, Woutrina, what's the animal life like in your own home other than the 3 kids? Oh, 2 farms? Wow. I killed my goldfish and turtle when I was a young lad, so I am not a pet person. Anyway, so we've talked a lot about science and literature, and I'm a big fan of the humanities. I work in the humanities. We talk a lot about STEM education, but my next award recipient would agree that STEAM is a better way to look at it. We need the arts in there as well, just to, give people a little bit more humanity. Stephen Marc is our final presenter today. He is class of 76 as well, so another 50th reunion participant. And he is a documentary and street photographer, a digital montage artist, and an educator. He's an emeritus professor of photography at Arizona State and a former faculty member at Columbia College in Chicago, which is where my advisor and music teacher at Pomona got her degree in the 1930s. But we're not old. Stephen was named a Guggenheim Fellow in Photography in 2021. His works have been exhibited at major institutions, including the Smithsonian Institution and the Brooklyn Museum. His landmark project is entitled Passage of the Underground Railroad, and it explores the history, identity, and memory of those events through powerful visual storytelling. He's also a Pomona Pitzer Hall of Fame athlete. You saw him in action in our intro interview, and he's a former All-American in track and field. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Marc, and we'll attach your computer. It'll be fine.
All right. Everything's gonna work? Yep. Good to go. Okay. Use the mic for a second. Hey, Dick. How's it turn? Actually, it's not coming up because I have this here, but it's not there. Yeah. Just the mirroring? Yeah. Set up to reverse, so something must have happened.
Yeah, I think when it comes in here.
Okay. It's up. Okay, so I don't know what's up. It's up.
So,
Do we have that or just oh, screen, full screen mode? Click on that for some reason.
Right, full screen. There. Yeah. Should be full screen option. Scroll maybe?
Let me talk while you do that. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, it looks like it's up. Thank you very much. It's an unexpected pleasure and honor to be here, especially to receive this award. And it's only because I wasn't around for a few things. So for one, my reception. The reception for the you listen? Okay. So for one, the reception for my exhibition when I graduated from here in '76, I was not here. I was actually across country at a track meet. When I entered the Hall of Fame, I was not here for that either. And this is my first reunion. However, I have come through. However, I have slipped in a few times to kind of see the campus and do a few things. So anyway, let me get kind of going. I have a lot of work to show you. Too many stories to tell. So let me just see how this goes. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Champaign-Urbana is my home away from home. And I had a lot of different experiences in terms of Blackstone Rangers type of warfare, time periods in Chicago. If anybody knows Chicago, grew up on 58th in Michigan, 87th in Dorchester. Champaign-Urbana, like I said, was my home away from home. It was a good escape valve. My dad said something a long time ago that was important. He said, the only time that we've wasted is the time when you don't understand how some of the things you do in life fits in with the other things. And I have to say that, for me, Pomona was a place that probably allowed me to pull those things together in terms of those loose ends in a way that I never thought was possible. I also had a very, very close friend from the time I was 11 who was a cartoonist and graphic artist, and I learned a great deal from him as well, just as a kid. Unfortunately, as I moved back to Chicago, we lost him. So at any rate, let me move ahead. I'm going to show you some different projects, and I'll tell you some other things along the way. But I probably should say a couple other things real quickly, though. There are a couple people that are really, really important to me in terms of faculty members here and professors. And I'd have to say that the first one I want to mention is in the back row right now. It's Pat McCahey. And he wasn't just a coach. He was also a professor. One of the most important classes that he taught was mind, culture, and sport that I still feel I'm almost living, as I go through my life. Pat and I had a humorously contentious relationship. I hope he understands what I mean by that. And I'm smiling because over the years, I've thought about what it would have been like if I had been bigger, if I'd been a little stronger, if I'd been a little faster. But I never, ever thought about having a different coach. Okay? All right. So the other person is Leland Rice. And I was a psych major. I had Mike Hurston as my roommate. When I first came here, I actually flew to his house, stayed for a couple of days, then came on campus. He was my assigned roommate. He was my roommate more than 1 year. In fact, I do have a gripe, and that is my sophomore year, I thought I was going to have a situation where my roommate was going to move out. Senior pulled me into a room. I was going to get to pull a room. And unfortunately, they made a mistake, and they gave my room to the other Steve Smith. So now you're going to start to understand a little bit about this Smith-Marc thing, okay? Also, I won an award that year, and I was not at that award ceremony either. Turns out they contacted the other Steve Smith. Got there before they gave him the check, though, so everything's okay. So I was a psych major, and I didn't know I was going to be a psych major. I took Psych 51, and Hurston actually was sitting down the bed, and he knew he wanted to be a doctor. His dad was a radiologist. He's now an endocrinologist. And so what we had was a case where he is going through the college catalog, reading off the majors. Well, once we hit no for zoology, there was an issue. So I ended up taking the psych class, loved it, wanted to take another one. And to make a longer story short, I ended up being a psych major as a placeholder, which I really enjoyed, really loved, because I was going to take other classes. So here I was, a junior, first semester junior. Oh, I didn't say one other thing. I had a year of photography in high school. Had a teacher named Robert Erickson, really wanted to continue photography, thought about doing it coming to college. But I had these two parents, and they said, don't even think about it. So I couldn't get into a class because I wasn't an upperclassman, and I wasn't an art major. But finally, in my junior year, I had thesis, comps, and 2 classes left in psychology, and I took a photo class. Bad part is, I never finished that psych major. I had perception and cognition. I took the class, and with Leland Rice, it was incredible. And around the 5th or 6th week of class, I'm not exaggerating, I went to see Gerald Ackerman to see about being a double major, finishing in psych, doing an art major in photography, but there was the other thing I had to do, and that was run track. And so I really had this dilemma, and I was looking at it in terms of, can I really do 3 or can I just do 2 of them? And I didn't mean to tell you this, but I had a conversation with somebody, and I said, Pat, I think what happens if I can only do 2? And I do the psych major, and I do art. He goes, you won't graduate. And I said, why? He said, because of your grades. I said, but my grades are fine. He said, I haven't changed them yet. Okay. So at any rate, 5 weeks in that class, I went to see him. I wanted to be an art major, and he didn't think it was a good idea. And he said, no way. Not a good idea. He said, but I respect, I'll ask your teacher. So I asked Leland. I know this because Leland told me. And Leland said, no, that's not an idea. I don't like that idea at all. He said, but who is it? And when he told it was me, he went, no, him, I'll do it. So Leland and I have a very close relationship. We stay in touch all the time. See if I can weave some of that into it later, but I know I have to hit the gas because they're going to pull the mic on me and they're going to turn the lights out. So here we go. So I've done several different books. One was called Urban Notions, and this is when I returned back to Chicago. I went from here to grad school in Philadelphia, Temple University. After I graduated, I went right back to Chicago, and I was very, very fortunate to pick up a teaching job at Columbia College, where I taught for 20 years. Directed the graduate program for 13 of the years, ran the workshop lecture series for the 9 consecutive. But the thing is, I knew that although I'd grown up during Blaisdell Distinguished Disciple Award for a time period, that was not the dominant thing in terms of what I remember. I had to make sure my shoes were tied up every time I went out the door because I did not get called by the recruiting group, but track and field helped. So at any rate, this is the first book that I did, and so it actually covers the triangle in Illinois that I went through, which was Chicago, Champaign-Urbana, and Springfield, where my cousin had grandparents. And so I really wanted to just try to create a body of work that was not quite documenting photojournalistic. Some of the things are sort of staged and set up. This one, not quite, but I don't have time to tell you that story. So I'm just going to show you a few images from these. And don't ask me how to do this and I get wet. Okay? And so that's the first one. So in 92, I did a book called The Black Transatlantic Experience. It's a longer story, but sometimes, or many times, I actually start working on a project and I don't know where it's going to go. And I try to tell my students to just kind of stay loose with it. Give it a chance, see what happens. So what this is actually a documentation of the British colonial slave trade route. So these are all places where I could have found myself. So it's Ghana, Jamaica, England, the U.S. So I'm just going to show you just a couple of images from it as well. So this is old, for the photographers in here, silver gelatin prints. Is that in Chicago? It's a Black Club Party talent contest. And this is the one that has been probably seen the most, and one of my friends sort of refers to it as Ansel Adams' term, as my moonrise over Hernandez. So if I can, I'm going to try to slip it a quick story because it's the last image for a Change in Chicago project. It was the last day, the last roll of film I was shooting. I was walking down 57th Street Beach in Chicago. I took what I thought was the last shot. I went to move my thumb forward, and I was waiting for it to stop, and all of a sudden it kept going, it hit a click. I'm like, oh no, I've got to come up with something. So I see this guy walking down the beach, he tosses his baby in there and catches it. I'm like, oh no, if I could get that, that would be incredible. So at any rate, he kept going, so I focused on my imaginary spot if he kept going, made sure I made the meter reading properly so I wouldn't blow the exposure because of what happens with skin tone and light in the background. And so, and I had my imaginary exit, I swear, was glowing on the ground. So the guy walks, he hits that spot, he starts taking another step, and I couldn't believe it. I just pulled the camera down and said, wait a minute, hold it, man. You know, I go throw the baby again? He goes, no, I'm not throwing the baby again. Why, you gonna take a picture? I said, of course I'm gonna take. Baby goes up, hit the shutter, make the photograph, hit the, try to advance, no film now. Try to hit the rewind knob, try to wind it, turn to the guy, he was gone. So this has been 2 different book covers. It might be a 3rd one coming up. There's some discussion of that. I've been accused of doing it on the computer, but no, I wouldn't have done it this way. But the other thing is I've been waiting for the guy to come up and introduce himself, never happened. I realized over the years, I should be looking for somebody about 6'3", deep voice going on with the baby. So let's see what happens. Now, I started working with photographic patterns, which is, these are actually ceramic tile. So I started working with surface pattern designs because I bought a computer. So I'm going to keep moving on this pretty quickly because I started working on a series called Soul Searching. So I was working with the family archives, self-portraits, and found imagery as well. But they're all very heavily pattern-based. So at the very beginning, you saw braided hair. This is actually Suminagashi floating ink on water, picking it up. The ladies on the left are in the marketplace in Ghana. And so I created these pieces that are sometimes very large. And have to stop, not tell everything on here because we don't have the time, but it says on the back of this guy's head, ain't no future in your frontin'. And I started doing them also in color. And I first started colorizing and then started working in color. And so what you actually see is a 3-dimensional piece with the wishbones. What I wanted to do is create a 3-dimensional thing where the wishbones are walking together as a actually sculptural piece. Didn't happen, but there's several different ways here. And if you see me smile, there's some stories I can't afford to tell you because of the time, so we have to keep going, all right? Now, I was given some space at the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, and I had to create a piece that was 9 by 11 feet. Problem was, it gave me time, but they didn't give me any money. So I had to do this with office laser printer and using 110 cardstock and double-sided tape. And that's how it had to be broken up. And this is too big to be done in a tiling program, so I had to figure out a way to kind of just systematically break it up. And I've done this a couple of different times. So from there, ended up doing a couple of commission projects. This was for Jamestown Community College in Jamestown, New York. They wanted a big piece, and the top piece is actually 3 by 12 feet, but it's in 3 by 4 foot sections. So they wanted a big piece, but they didn't want it to be all one long piece because they were concerned about shipping, framing, and everything else. So I had to create what I refer to as a gap jumper. So it's actually permanently installed along with a group of other images, and it's just about their town. And I was asked to do it, and I said absolutely, because I was working on the Underground Railroad project. This is a major place for the Underground Railroad. Across the street was a Painted Lady house where Paul Leone, major expert on the Underground Railroad, lived, which is one of my good friends now. This is one I did for Avalon Library. So these 3 pieces should be linear, but I tried, put them together so I could show them to all at one time. And so the little ones are 4 by 6 feet. The other one is 4 by 14 feet. And so what I did was I had to learn more about Avalon, which was my old neighborhood, and then go and photograph. So you actually see the, so you see different historic photographs, but also Avalon developed because of drainage technology, as well as development and things connected with the 1893 World's Fair. So that's why you see some of those other things in there as well too. So I'm going to move ahead because after that, I was then allowed to apply for a Public Art Commission. It was the Public Art Commission for the Avalon Library, but for CTA. So I turned in 2 proposals, but I had to come up with different materials. So it had to be one for 47th Street, one for 79th Street. And so I really need to tell you this too, because it's really crazy, because I got this letter and it was really, really disappointing, because it said, we're really sorry that you were not selected as one of the artists for 47th Street. And this is really sad, because this is a $90,000 commission. It said, so to see who the artists are that did get the commission, go to the next page. I go to the next page, and under 79th Street is my name. So I actually had to find out I got a $90,000 commission from a rejection letter. So needless to say, it's my favorite rejection letter of all times. I didn't get the acceptance letter for 2 weeks. Okay, so these pieces are actually 4 by 10 and 4 by 13 feet, encased in glass, straddling the stairways at the train station. And what you have is 79th Street in, I think 1934, and then once again in 2006. If you're looking here, whoops, and here, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Okay. Let's see what happens. All right. Did I get rid of it? Nope. I blew it. I get it. That's it. Thank you. No, I appreciate it though. Thank you. All right. So moving ahead, this is Passage on the Underground Railroad, 3rd book that I did in 2009. And so what it is this started out as, I had to be candid with you, it was a 2-week residency at Seba Gallery in Buffalo, New York. And it turned into a decade. This project just took over my life. I'm also the first and only Network to Freedom program of the National Park Service for the state of Arizona, based on my ability to lecture and exhibit work on the Underground Railroad. In the book is this page, which I own all of these newspapers. By the way, I made a mistake. I bought something. And I used to use archives and people's special collections, but I bought something because I recognized it in an antique store, and that was the problem, because that wasn't the last thing I bought. So it's actually 30 different slavery-related ads that you see here. And I went on a trip, and I came home, and my wife said, "Did you get anything?" I said, "Yes." I said, "But I only bought 1 newspaper." She said, "You bought another newspaper?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "I can't believe it. What was so special about this newspaper?" I said, "It had Cash for Negroes." She goes, No, you already have one of those." And I said, "No, but take another look." And I laid the page out. And what it was, I don't have all of them in here, but this gives you a detail to see. On the same page, it had cash for 300, cash for 400, and a third ad that's not showing here, but it's on the page, cash for 500, as these major groups of folks were being moved from the East Coast to the Deep South. So servantware was code for, people that are enslaved. You had reward notices, etc. Negro man for sale, and even the header, lands and Negroes. None of these things were typed out. These are actually photographed pages of a newspaper from about 7 newspapers that I've actually kind of stitched together to make this 1 page for the book. So moving ahead, this is Bishop Henderson at the Michigan Street Church. So Buffalo and Detroit are the major crossing sites going to the Underground Railroad after the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act. And I then wanted to so the pieces are about 1:4 ratio to take you in and out of the places for interpretations, whether they're reenactors, etc. But then I also built these other pieces that allow me to work with different kinds of documents, artifacts, locations to really tell the bigger picture of slavery. And so I feel very, very blessed that I was able to get into some of the locations, to gain access to some of the documents and artifacts, and be able to find some of the material. And it got to the point where people were kind of helping me out. Even some of the antique stores and things, places would hold on and contact me. And if anybody is interested in old newspapers, Timothy Hughes Rare Newspapers, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Sometimes they're absolutely wonderful. And by the way, you can go online and kind of look at the papers. You don't have to necessarily buy them, but yeah. This is probably the best known house in the country. This is the home of John Rankin. It was featured in National Geographic. This is the house that Eliza and Uncle Tom's Cabin really went to. She was not a fictional Harriet Beecher Stowe character. What you're seeing on the other side of the Ohio River is Kentucky, and you're seeing the bullet holes from where somebody over there was taking shots at this place. One of my friends said we celebrate the end of every war except for the Civil War. He said the reason for that is because that one's not quite over yet. Look at the stairway over to the right. That's Freedom Stairway, Liberty Stairway, and it goes, and this is it, going down to 4th Street in town. But when you get to the edge of the river, you get to this house, which is the home of John Parker, Black Underground conductor. Much longer story about he had been enslaved, gained his freedom, but also helped help people to escape. But he didn't bring them to his own home because he was always under surveillance. He actually had foundries, had a foundry with made tobacco presses and swell pulverizers, actually had a patent. But the most important thing about this is that 2 guys came to his house, banged on the door, asked for help. He said, come on in. You can't stay here. We have to get to the next station at Red Oak. He took him upstairs to get him by the fireplace. And while he was trying to make the arrangements, there was this pounding on the door. and a posse stormed the place. They came in, searched the place, but left empty-handed. So Parker ran back downstairs to see, ran upstairs to see what happened after they left, and found that, wondering if they had jumped out the second floor window. Turned out that they had found a ladder, climbed up into the rafters, pulled the ladder up behind them, and no one looked up. So these are actually Confederate bills and also obsolete banknotes, along with some other ads. There's a combination of the Ohio River and the Mississippi River kind of merged together. And this is the Hitchcock House over in western Iowa. And sometimes folks were brought here and sheltered for, long periods of time until they could actually be taken down to the river. And the guy at the Nishnabotna Ferry House would come across the river and then take them over. So going into the image, people would then head on an underground road, possibly to Chicago, Detroit, or they may stop and work along the way. But coming out of this image and going that direction, it's part of the Mormon Trail. So what you have is a letter from 1838 owned by John Ford in Pittsburgh, where it's actually a slaveholder ordering shoes for his slaves. So at the bottom of that letter, you actually read across the sky. You're reading down the letter, and you can see the shoe sizes of his people. Longer story to that, but got to keep going. And this is actually the end of this, but it's actually in Canton, Mississippi. So my grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother are from Canton. My grandmother was born there, and my great-great-grandmother was enslaved somewhere in that area. I don't know exactly where. But on the guy's chest at the courthouse yard is a token that is from a slave auction house in Charleston that sold slaves. So you can kind of see what, how I kind of work with some of the material there. Okay. Now, this is drapetomania. It's the 1851 pseudoscientific term coined by Dr. Samuel Cartwright concerning the mental defect and deficiency that caused the slaves to want to run away. So the different illustrations where I started collecting different kinds of postcards, trade cards, pre-1935 of black memorabilia. The guy on horseback is actually from William Still's book, original, first edition copy. A friend of mine owns it. But you actually see runaway notices, the little inky racer guy, all kinds of different characters. And I didn't turn anything around, so that's just the way they run, where they're heading. So the little inside joke to this is because it was the mental defect and deficiency, that's why they're actually look like they're running from Ohio back to Kentucky. Okay, so there's a whole series of these as well, but I'll keep moving. And this is the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Riders in Montgomery, Alabama. You actually have John Lewis in there. You have Zerg as well, who is a gentleman who was so beaten so badly and couldn't continue. And the doorway that you see back there was actually the colored-only entrance for that bus station. So I started doing a whole different series. So this is actually I went to the 45th anniversary of the Black Panther Party, but before that, I actually went to the home of David Hilliard. And so this is actually the site where little Bobby Hutton was killed with the shootout with police on, you can see the date, April 6, 1968. The house that little Bobby Hutton was in was actually where the vacant lot is. Unfortunately, he was killed there. David Hilliard actually was hidden in the basement of the other house in the background. So I've done these different kinds of interpretations. I've kind of gone to places trying to gain access to documents, artifacts, in order to kind of create the pieces. And this is the book I did more recently, American True Colors. It's 250 photographs in advance now of this country becoming 250 years old right now. And so I'm just going to show you just a few images from it. I was very fortunate for there's Independent Book Publishers, IPPY Awards. It tied for the gold medal for the best book in photography in 2021. And so this is in Brooklyn. This is a Middle Passage tribute to ancestors in Coney Island. This is Governor Haley, signing the bill to take the Confederate battle flag down. I'm not going to use the pointer this time because I know what happened last time. But in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Jesse Jackson there. And actually then ran down and photographed as well. So it's a long story. And by the way, I do not have press credentials. So what I do is I get there early, talk to people, including the police. I wouldn't tell my students that 20 years ago, but I do now, because if all hell breaks loose, you don't want that to be the first time they've seen you. So this is actually the Klan the following week on the south side of the Capitol steps. And the banner that they have with the burning cross and the hooded figures actually says, "The original boys in the hood." Okay. So at any rate, when the Klan came in, it's a longer story because I do talk to people, but they came in with state troopers guarding them. Then the state troopers had AR-15s. They had to park about 5 blocks away. And as they streamed in, some of them had actually Confederate flags that say Ku Klux Klan on them as well. I'll see one of those right now, but there's some in there. And so anyway, I, like all the photographers, ran over to photograph them. And so one of the guys in the clan says to the other one, "Oh man, it's hot out here." So I have to kind of attribute things at Pomona, growing up in Chicago, back and forth between Champaign, playing darts, one of the best art scenes in the city of Chicago, and Chicago is a very segregated city, but it's a wonderful place to be. But all of those mixture of different experiences of different people. And that's one of the things that certainly happened here at Pomona. And so at any rate, I have a little bit of a different sense of humor and able to kind of flow with different things. So when the guy said, "It's not hot here, it's not hot, it's just humid," I didn't mean to say it, but I heard myself because I knew that was my end. Different sense of humor. And I hollered back, "It's not hot, it's just humid." And they looked at me like I was crazy and said, "What did you say?" And I said, "It's not hot, it's just humid." And they just stared at me. And I had this big Nikon. I threw my arms out like this. I said, "What do you want? I'm from Arizona." So they start cracking up laughing. So I'm running backwards photographing the Klan. I get to the barricade. I can't go through. They do. And one of the guys stopped and said, "See, supposedly we hate everybody, but obviously that's not true. Otherwise, I've been having this conversation with you." I said, "Yeah, I know. Be cool and be safe." So the guy that I'm talking about is probably one of the people that's just on the other side of the officer. It's a longer story, but on the way out, yes, I did photograph them. And here I am right behind them. Nobody else is there. You can see the fight happening. I'm using a wide angle lens, so I'm very, very close. They feel me behind him. And he turns around, sees me. Since he knew me, he stuck his tongue out. So I actually have photographs with the Klan giving me the thumbs up, etc. So the thing is, I photograph a lot of people who don't look like me, think like me, act like me. And when they share information with me and or allow me to photograph them, my term for them is they are my situational friends. And they are greatly appreciated. And the thing is that if they talk to me, then we have a chance. They have a chance to talk to somebody else. I get a little concerned with the protests and things where you have one side, because then that one side whips up and demonizes the other side. And I want both sides here. I don't want a confrontation. I want the communication. So in Columbia, South Carolina, I saw many folks, there are many arguments, debates, etc. You'd be surprised how many of them ended up in handshakes and hugs. And I lived in Arizona and Phoenix, so that's a battleground state. And I'd be here forever if I told you some of the different kinds of interactions. So this is the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This is the next book that I did, and the last one. I hope it's not going to be the last one, but Sweet Cattails in Tangled Times. And it's a combination of straight photographs, and if it's a 2:3 ratio rectangle, if it's a 1:3, then it's 2 or more photographs stitched together. So the top one is up in Seattle. This combination of Baltimore, Wildwood, New Jersey, and John Travolta Day in Brooklyn, in front of Lenny's Pizza Parlor before it closed. And there was John Travolta actually did show up, but more interesting was kind of the reenactor, actually. This is Jesse Jackson, Reverend Barber, and also one of the local pastors, Stewart. And this is the Moral Monday March in Phoenix. This is the Stop the Steal rally in Phoenix, just before the incident in January the 6th in D.C. And so the other thing you have to think about is that when I was talking about doing the book, American True Colors, I was looking at it in terms of, books like Robert Frank's The Americans from the 50s, Walker Evans' American Photographs. There would have been a book by Carter Bissell in the 40s that didn't happen, but if you look at his book called American Passing, you'll see quite a few of the photographs are from the 40s. And also, Winogrand and many other people. So I really wanted, but the thing is that times have changed. So I really wanted to look at the country again overall. Well, not only that, but how they saw the country is different from how I see the country. But also very important also is how the country sees me is very different. So it's not just making the photographs. You have to remember who I am as well, too. I need to move fast, but I'd have to tell you something else. And that is that lady actually, Jake and Jelly, the Q shaman, is on the bullhorn. I know him. I've only photographed him 3 times. So after we had a conversation, I turned around and made this shot of the crowd. And this lady jumped up and says, oh, no, you better not. And she turned around, miss this. So if you want to talk to me about it later, I'll tell you a few things about how some of these things happen, too. This is actually in D.C. This is the anti-vax rally and the anti-vax firefighters. And when I got back, somebody said, what was it like? And I didn't think about it. I said, it was just like in Arizona. I said, there, only the police had guns. Now, this is just more recent work. I've moved back to Chicago, and I've felt that I had done everything I wanted to do in Arizona. I don't like to use the word retired, and some of you have already heard this, probably tired of hearing it. But I have a problem with the word retired, because how can I be retired if I wasn't tired in the first place? So I moved back to work. So these are just a few sampling images of some of the things in Chicago just within the last 2 years. And I'm hoping that there's going to be a way to actually do this in a book form. This is actually outside the Beyonce concert. And this is actually, unfortunately, where I had to went to see if the chess players, and there's some extremely good ones that play on the South Side. A couple of them, I think 4 of them are actually officially masters. I had a friend that was close to becoming a master and really pushing throughout as an extremely good chess player, but I ran track with him. He was the star sprinter with me in high school. And I was, of course, I was a hurdler there. So I had to go and tell the chess players that he had passed the day before, but they already knew. So while I'm photographing this one guy walks up, just stands out there, and of course you see him trying to coach him on what move to make. And that's Father Flager. This is a Target boycott, and that's the last image. It's right on the river in Chicago.
Can they put
Oh, you want the backup?
behind? Is that okay?
So what?
If it's easy. If it's
I don't know if it's going to come back up now. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, you can bring it back up again?
Actually, let's just.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. If it's work. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. There you go. Thank you.
All right, close enough. All right.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
enough. All right.
Okay. And let's get you all up a little bit this way. In the middle of the photo. Go that way. Go that way.
We going this way? Okay.
And then come forward. You're gonna stop. Right there. That's perfect. Okay, good. Nice, nice, nice.
All right, now one with the tattoo.
Costs $1.
You made the money later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually the photographer joke. Nobody says,
Thank you, Stephen. Lunch has begun on the quad, but thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. Oh.
Are we still doing the winners? I just kept the banner and said I wanted to. So I was. Do you want me to see if they're rhymed?
Can we do it here?
Sure.
Traditionally.
Sure.